credits, we're diving into Hokum, a film built around illusion, where what you see might not be what's real.
Oh, it really is.
And, we're making this deep dive, your ultimate spoiler-light shortcut to understanding this cinematic and psychological puzzle of Damien McCarthy's latest horror hit. Because usually, when you think about a haunted house story, the rules are incredibly straightforward.
Yeah, totally. The ghost is real, the walls are bleeding, the floorboards are creaking.
Right, and characters just have to figure out how to escape the physical space of the house. It's binary. The house is bad, outside is good.
Absolutely.
But think about what happens when a film decides to make the scariest room in the house the inside of the protagonist's own head. Like, what happens when the person experiencing the haunting fundamentally refuses to believe it's even happening?
Well, I mean, that completely rewrites the survival playbook, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The threat ceases to be entirely external. You aren't just fighting an entity in the hall.
Yeah, you're fighting yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are fighting a psychological battle against your own stubborn perception of reality. It becomes the definition of a haunting you cannot run away from because the ghost is hitching a ride on your own skepticism.
So let's look at the premise here. We follow a novelist named Hokum. He's played by Adam Scott. And he retreats to the remote Bilberry Woods Hotel in Ireland.
Right.
And his stated goal is just to scatter his parents' ashes.
Right.
But instead, he gets dragged into this bizarre, layered mystery involving a missing bartender, weird local folklore, and a witch that is supposedly trapped in the hotel's honeymoon suite. Okay, let's unpack this.
So the anchor of every single illusion in Hokum is Ohm's mind. To really understand the deception of the film, you first have to understand the man who is absolutely refusing to see it.
Which is such a great character setup.
It is. Ohm makes his living writing fiction, inventing scenarios. Yet he possesses this almost militant refusal to entertain anything supernatural or unexplained in his actual life.
Which makes Adam Scott's casting so fascinating, I think. If you are familiar with his work, you probably know him as the lovable, slightly nerdy guy from Parks and Recreation.
Or the deeply repressed lead in Severance.
Yes, exactly. But here, he plays Ohm as this abrasive, deeply cynical, alcoholic jerk. Ohm is like a guy trying to use pure logic and sarcasm to debate his way out of a nightmare.
But the nightmare just weaponizes that skepticism against him.
Yes, it absorbs his logic and uses it to trap him further.
His cynicism operates as a defense mechanism, but it ultimately creates a massive blind spot. And the script masterfully surrounds Ohm with a supporting cast that serves as direct foils to his rigid worldview.
Right, like Fiona.
Yeah, Fiona, the bartender, played by Florence Ordesh, who leans into the mythology and literally hands Ohm a book of local folktales.
And then there's Mal, the front desk clerk, played by Peter Coonan.
Who is just paralyzed by cowardice. He completely buys into the hotel's dangerous reputation.
He really does. And most importantly, you have Jerry.
Oh, Jerry.
Played by David Wilmot. He is this local drifter who wanders around the woods drinking milk laced with magic mushrooms.
Such a wild detail.
Right. And he's fully attuned to and believing in the supernatural forces operating around the property. And the dynamic between these characters completely subverts whatever expectations you bring into the movie.
Oh, for sure. If you've watched enough horror, you think you know the archetypes.
Yeah, you assume the cowardly clerk is just harmless comedic relief, or the weird guy drinking mushroom milk in the woods is the primary antagonist.
But Hokum keeps you entirely off balance.
Yeah.
People who seem inherently good might actually have incredibly malicious intent.
And the ones who seem dangerous might be your only lifeline. You are constantly questioning your own judgment of these people right alongside Ohm.
Well, the underlying genius of Damien McCarthy's direction is how he uses Ohm's disbelief as the actual trap.
Okay, how so?
Ohm willingly decides to sleep in a cursed, supposedly off-limits honeymoon suite. He doesn't do it because he's brave. He does it simply because he refuses to believe the quote-unquote hokum of the witch stories.
He is practically mocking the folklore.
Exactly. The film demonstrates that apathy and arrogance can be just as dangerous as walking into a dark basement with a flashlight. He puts himself directly in the monster's path because his ego demands that the monster isn't real.
Right. And Ohm's internal denial creates such a suffocating atmosphere, but a filmmaker cannot just point a camera at a guy being stubborn for 2 hours.
No, definitely not.
You have to translate that internal suffocation into a physical, external world that traps him. The environment has to mirror the mindset.
And the visual language of this film is doing a tremendous amount of heavy lifting to trap the viewer in that exact same sense of unease. Colm Hogan, the director of photography, employs a very manipulative color palette.
Oh, the colors are so uncomfortable.
In a typical horror film, daylight is your safe harbor. It's when the audience gets to exhale. But Hogan washes the daylight scenes in this flattened yellow and bluish-green tint.
It almost makes the air feel stagnant. Like if you left a glass of milk out on the counter for 3 days, it just feels sickly and oppressive.
Yeah, that sickly tint strips the safety away from the daytime. But then look at how he treats the darkness. The night scenes are illuminated with these piercing spectral whites and a very strange gilded warmth.
Which is so counterintuitive.
It is. The shadows are ironically more vibrant and inviting than the sunlight. The color grading is psychologically conditioning you to feel more comfortable in the dark, which is exactly where the danger is hiding.
Wow. And the physical locations they use to achieve this are astonishing. Till Froelich, the production designer, essentially had to stitch a geographic Frankenstein together.
They really did.
They scouted for a hotel that felt inherently wrong, couldn't find one that matched the script's specific creepiness, and decided to build the geography themselves. Like, the main hotel exterior and hallways are a private residence in Cork.
But that massive, oppressive honeymoon suite.
They built that entirely from scratch on a soundstage at West Cork Studios. And for the sprawling, claustrophobic basement sequences, they moved production into an actual medieval castle. Castle freak.
It's incredible commitment.
It is, but I actually want to challenge this reliance on practical spaces for a second. We are in an era where digital effects can generate literally any atmosphere a director wants, with mathematically perfect lighting and infinite scale.
Sure.
Doesn't strictly binding yourself to physical sets and tangible props feel a bit, I don't know, archaic? Like you're artificially limiting the scope of the terror by relying on what you can build with wood and plaster.
Well, I mean, it might seem limiting if your goal is pure spectacle, but horror thrives on tangibility. When a threat feels physically present in the room, your brain registers the danger differently than it does with a pixelated entity.
That makes sense.
And Damien McCarthy actually has a background working as an electrician. That mechanical, tactile understanding of how things connect heavily influences his filmmaking. He builds tension mechanically rather than digitally.
Oh, like the dumbwaiter scene?
Yes. Consider the sequence involving that delicately timed clock that triggers the hotel's dumbwaiter. You aren't watching a CGI timer. You are listening to heavy physical gears grinding together.
You can really feel the weight of the mechanism. The tension comes from a physical object counting down to something terrible in real space.
Which brings up the most unsettling props in the entire film.
Oh no, the cherub.
Those creepy wooden cherubs in the suite. They are the ultimate defense of practical effects. They are unsettling specifically because they are real carved objects occupying the same physical breathing room as Adam Scott.
Didn't they build giant versions of them too?
They did. The production crew actually went so far as to build oversized, fist-sized versions of the cherub heads.
Oh.
They didn't do this for the wide shots. They built them solely to capture extreme macro close-ups of the facial expressions.
That is so deeply unsettling.
Right. They wanted to catch the slight mechanical changes in those cheeky, malicious little smiles directly in camera, using physical light hitting real wood, rather than handing it off to a visual effects house.
It grounds the illusion completely. If the physical trap of the hotel feels that real, it makes the monsters lurking inside it infinitely more terrifying.
Because it's tangible.
Yeah, and because once you establish a grounded reality, the film starts violently blurring the lines between local folklore, chemical hallucinations, and deeply buried childhood trauma.
The ambiguity of the threat is what breaks them down. Let's actually look at the sequence that truly tests the audience's nerves.
Oh, attempting to escape the witch by crawling into the mechanical dumbwaiter.
Yes.
That scene is pure claustrophobia, and it works so well because of how Brian Philip Davis edited the sequence. He utilizes speed ramps as the witch is crawling up the walls of the dumbwaiter shaft.
Such a great technique.
For sure. If you aren't familiar with the term, a speed ramp is when the footage suddenly shifts frame rates. Like, a character might be moving at normal speed and then suddenly jerks forward at an unnatural, stuttering hyperspeed.
It completely breaks your brain's ability to predict how the threat is moving toward you.
It really does. But beyond the temporal manipulation, Davis strictly adheres to the editing philosophy Ridley Scott established in Alien.
Oh, absolutely. The core of that philosophy is obfuscation. Your imagination will always construct something far more horrifying than what a special effects makeup team can glue to an actor's face.
Because it's the unknown.
Right. By keeping the witch obscured in the pitch-black shadows of the shaft, or hiding her silhouette just behind the sheer curtains of the canopy bed, the dread expands to fill the unknown space. The audience only receives these fuzzy, incomplete glimpses,
But the glimpses you do get are brilliant. They layered the witch's skin and hair with these intricate mushroom textures.
which forces you, the viewer, to pause and ask a very serious question.
Is this witch an actual centuries-old supernatural entity, or is she just a chemical illusion? Jerry the Drifter has been drinking that hallucinogenic mushroom milk, and maybe Ohm has been exposed to something in the water or the air of this hotel. Is the monster real, or is it botany?
It traps the viewer in the exact same skeptical dilemma that is facing. You're watching the screen, trying to rationalize an irrational image.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the witch isn't the only thing hunting him in the dark. We need to talk about the rabbit.
Oh, the rabbit.
Damien McCarthy has a well-documented obsession with rabbits in his horror films. If you saw his previous movies, Caveat or Oddity, you might remember a very creepy drumming rabbit toy.
Yeah, McCarthy has openly admitted this stems from a severe childhood fear he developed after watching the animated movie Watership Down.
But in Hokum, he elevates that underlying phobia into a main antagonist known as Jack the Jackass, or the Rabbit Man.
And anyone expecting a cute stylized bunny is in for a shock. The Rabbit Man is a towering anthropomorphic nightmare with these bulging dead eyes. But the design isn't just an arbitrary attempt to be weird.
Not at all. This is the major aha moment of the entire narrative. The Rabbit Man isn't just a random piece of Irish folklore. As the film progresses, you realize this creature is a warped, twisted manifestation of a friendly children's television show host.
A host watched as a child.
Exactly. It is the exact television program Ohm was watching as a child at the precise moment he experienced his ultimate life-defining trauma, the moment he accidentally shot and killed his own mother.
This specific revelation is the hinge that elevates Hokum from a beautifully crafted haunted house movie into a profound psychological thriller. McCarthy takes a deep cut from Irish fairy folklore.
The puka, right.
Yes, the puka, a shape-shifting spirit that traditionally takes the form of a dark rabbit or a horse. And he merges it seamlessly with unresolved, debilitating human trauma.
It is devastating. The monster literally looks like his trauma. His brain couldn't process the horror of what happened in his living room, so the trauma froze in his mind, mutating the friendly TD host he was looking at into this towering, inescapable demon.
It's just a terrifying concept. The most dangerous ghosts aren't the witches hiding in a castle basement. The most dangerous ghosts are the memories we absolutely refuse to face.
If you bury a trauma deep enough.
And wrap it in enough sarcasm and cynicism, it doesn't die. It mutates into a monster that will eventually come looking for you.
Bringing that level of heavy, real-world grief into a film that also features jump scares and witches creates a massive tonal tightrope.
Oh, without a doubt.
How much terror and how much emotional devastation can you actually subject an audience to before they just shut down? This challenge actually led to a massive behind-the-scenes pivot in how the film concludes.
Well, the emotional weight of that journey required an incredibly calibrated performance from Adam Scott. And because the production team took the time to physically build the honeymoon suite as a fully functional 360-degree set on a soundstage, Scott was afforded a luxury that is almost unheard of in modern filmmaking.
Oh, they shot chronologically, didn't they?
Yes. He was able to shoot his scenes in the suite in strict chronological order over the course of 3 weeks.
Think about how rare that is. Usually, a movie's schedule is dictated entirely by budget, lighting setups, or when a location is available. An actor might be crying over a character's death on day 1 of the shoot and then filming their happy introduction on day 20.
They have to constantly map out where their character is emotionally on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. But by shooting chronologically, Scott didn't have to guess his emotional trajectory. He could organically map Ohm's psychological descent day by day.
He could build the arrogant tension, peak it during a scare, bring it back down into a state of exhausted investigation, and then gradually push it to the absolute breaking point.
Which culminates in that brilliant, quiet moment where Ohm physically draws a chalk circle around the bed to keep the witch out.
It is the exact moment his cynicism breaks, and he finally acknowledges the terrifying reality of his situation.
But the reality of that situation was originally drafted to be far more punishing. Damien McCarthy has revealed in interviews that during the 2 years he spent writing and refining the script, his original ending was pitch black.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Ohm was going to die down in that creepy Castle Freak basement, consumed by the monsters and his own guilt.
Wow. But, McCarthy recognized that leaving the character in that basement would leave the audience in that basement too. Keeping that bleak conclusion would make the film profoundly heavy, perhaps too heavy for anyone to ever want to watch it a second time.
Right.
He realized he wanted the cinematic experience to function more like a roller coaster. You want the visceral thrills, you want the terrifying drops, you want to be flipped upside down in the dark.
But ultimately, when the ride pulls back into the station, you want the audience to be able to unbuckle the harness and get off safely. So he reworked it into a much more emotional, redemptive ending. Doesn't just survive the physical threat of the hotel, he survives the internal haunting. He encounters the ghost of his mother, which provides this incredibly poignant moment where he is finally forced to look directly at the childhood trauma he has spent his entire adult life avoiding.
He finds a sliver of healing.
Yes, but to frame this entire journey, McCarthy added a very bizarre prologue and epilogue to the movie. The film opens and closes with footage of a conquistador completely lost in a harsh desert.
The desert framing device definitely confused some critics upon release. Because the film secured funding tied to Image Nation Abu Dhabi, there was a cynical assumption among some viewers that this desert sequence was just a contractual obligation.
Just a forced inclusion to secure the budget.
Exactly.
But if you look at the thematic structure, McCarthy clearly intended it to reflect Ohm's actual growth, both as a novelist and as a human being. The conquistador story is the fiction Ohm is writing. As Ohm begins the movie trapped in his own cynical, hopeless worldview, the conquistador is hopelessly lost.
Right.
But by the epilogue, after Ohm has faced his trauma, the story he is writing shifts from absolute bleakness to a narrative that actually contains a sense of survival and hope.
It acts as a perfect mirror for his internal evolution. And this entire shift in the ending raises an important question for anyone who consumes or creates dark fiction. What is the ideal balance of horror? Is a horror film fundamentally more effective or more artistically pure when it leaves the audience in total, uncompromising despair?
Or is there actually more narrative power in dragging an audience to the absolute edge of darkness, only to offer them a hard-fought glimmer of healing and redemption after the terror subsides?
It is the eternal debate of the genre, because the despair is what sticks to your ribs and keeps you awake at night, but the hope and the catharsis are what make you want to recommend the movie to a friend.
So what does this all mean? When you strip away the incredible physical sets, the creeping shadows, and the terrifying bug-eyed rabbit men, Hokum is utilizing the vehicle of a ghost story to ask you a very real, grounded question. What is the Hokum in your own life?
That's the real question.
Think about your own defense mechanisms. What illusions, what cynical stories, or what arrogant logic do you tell yourself every single day just to avoid walking down into the dark, unresolved corners of your own past?
The film serves as a brutal reminder that skepticism and pure logic can act as a fantastic shield against the world. But if you hold on to that shield too tightly and refuse to ever put it down, it seamlessly transforms into a cage.
Oh, had to literally get on his hands and knees, draw a line in chalk, and accept the impossible before he could finally forgive himself.
Sometimes you have to stop pretending the ghost isn't there, look it right in the eye, and believe in it before you can finally set it free.
And that wraps our deep dive into Hokum. If you enjoyed this one, follow Roll Credits and share it with someone who's into mind-bending stories. And let us know what film we should cover next, old or new.